Hollywood is a graveyard of billion-dollar ideas that vanished overnight.
We often view movies as inevitable products that appear in theaters.
But for every Batman or Superman film you have seen, a shadow version was killed before the cameras could even roll. We are talking about fully written scripts, built sets, and cast actors wiped from existence by studio politics, tax loopholes, and sudden changes in leadership. From Nicolas Cage playing Superman against the giant spider, to the $90 million Batgirl movie Warner Brothers deleted to save money on taxes. These are the lost chapters of DC history. The film industry witnessed an unprecedented event in August 2022. Warner Brothers did not just cancel a movie, they tried to erase it from existence. Batgirl was not a rough draft or concept art presentation, as it was finished. Directors Adil El Arbi and Bilal Fallah had completed filming, the special effects were largely done, and composer Natalie Holt was working on the score. Leslie Grace starred as Barbara Gordon, Brendan Fraser played the villain Firefly, and Michael Keaton had even suited up again as Batman. However, the new studio leadership looked at the $90 million price tag and decided the movie was worth more dead than alive. By shelving it permanently, they could claim a massive tax write-off and recoup their costs by promising the government that no one would ever see a single frame of the footage. The servers were wiped, the files were locked away, and an entire blockbuster film became a corporate receipt. Years before the Avengers assembled, Mad Max director George Miller was days away from shooting the biggest superhero movie in history. In 2007, Justice League Mortal had a full cast, costumes, and a $200 million budget. Armie Hammer was set to play Batman, DJ Catrona was Superman, and the film featured a massive lineup, including Green Lantern, The Flash, and Wonder Woman. The script adapted the Tower of Babel storyline, where Batman's paranoid contingency plans against his own teammates are stolen and used to destroy them. It was dark, ambitious, and ready for production until the writer's strike hit. Production stalled, tax rebates in Australia evaporated, and the window of opportunity slammed shut. The sets were destroyed and the cast was sent home, so Miller went on to make Mad Max Fury Road instead. We missed a Justice League movie that might have changed cinema, but we received Furiosa out of the deal. This might be the most famous canceled movie in history. Tim Burton was hired in the late 90s to direct a Superman movie starring Nicolas Cage. The script by Kevin Smith was based on the Death of Superman comic arc and featured Doomsday and Brainiac. Producer John Peters had bizarre demands, insisting that Superman could not fly, could not wear the traditional blue suit, and had to fight a giant spider in the third act. We have seen costume test footage of Cage with long hair in a strange, translucent suit that looked more like a neon light than Kryptonian armor. It promised to be weird and possibly terrible, but definitely unforgettable. Warner Brothers spent millions on pre-production before getting cold feet over the skyrocketing budget. The giant spider idea survived, as John Peters eventually forced it into the Will Smith movie Wild Wild West. Ben Affleck was set to write, direct, and star in his own solo Batman movie before Robert Pattinson took the role. This was not a standard action flick, as Affleck wanted to make a psychological thriller set primarily inside Arkham Asylum. The plot focused on Deathstroke, played by Joe Manganiello, systematically dismantling Bruce Wayne's life. Unlike other villains who want to blow up the city, Deathstroke intended to destroy Bruce's reputation and sanity first. He discovered Batman's identity and targeted everyone close to him, leading to a brutal climax within the asylum walls. Cinematographer Robert Richardson described it as a journey into insanity that explored the darker cracks of Bruce's mind. However, Affleck's personal struggles and the chaotic production of Justice League drained his passion for the role. He stepped away and left behind what might have been the most intense, combat-heavy Batman film ever made. Everything looked ready for Gal Gadot's third outing in December 2022. Director Patty Jenkins had co-written a script with Jeff Johns, and Gadot had just posted on social media about her excitement for the next chapter. A few days later, the project was dead. The new DC studio heads, James Gunn and Peter Safran, reportedly told Jenkins that her treatment did not fit their new plans. The situation turned messy quickly. reports surfaced that Jenkins sent a blunt email to studio leadership, linking to the Wikipedia definition of character arc, implying they failed to understand the story she was telling. Jenkins later walked away, rather than rewrite the script to meet their demands. The studio decided to reboot the entire timeline, leaving Wonder Woman's trilogy unfinished and Gal Gadot's version of the character stranded without a proper conclusion. Although many dislike Batman and Robin, director Joel Schumacher planned a sequel called Batman Unchained that sounded fascinating. It was intended to be a psychological redemption story, where the main villain was the Scarecrow, and Schumacher wanted Nicolas Cage for the role. The plot involves Scarecrow releasing a massive dose of fear toxin that would force Batman to hallucinate a trial where he was judged by all the villains he had failed to save. This meant cameos from Danny DeVito's Penguin, Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, and even Jack Nicholson's Joker. Harley Quinn was also in the script with a twist, as she was rewritten as the Joker's vengeful daughter rather than his girlfriend. It sounded like a live-action version of the Arkham games, years before they existed. After Batman and Robin failed critically, Warner Brothers panicked and scrapped the project, putting the Bat franchise in a coma for 8 years. This cancellation stings the most because it happened in public. Henry Cavill appeared in the post-credit scene of Black Adam in October 2022 and posted a video officially announcing his return as Superman. He quit his role in The Witcher to clear his schedule. Warner Brothers was actively soliciting pitches, and Stephen Knight wrote a treatment for the sequel that reportedly featured Brainiac as the villain. It seemed like the Snyderverse Superman was finally back, until James Gunn took over 2 months later and decided to recast a younger Clark Kent for his new universe. Cavill had to make a second announcement that he was actually fired. The script was tossed, the plans were abandoned, and the most physically perfect Superman of our generation was left with a single confused cameo as his goodbye. Writer David S. Goyer wrote a script called Escape from Supermax long before the TV show Arrow. The concept saw Green Arrow framed for a crime he did not commit and sentenced to a high-security prison designed for supervillains. To escape, he had to team up with the very criminals he helped put away. The script was packed with villains like Icicle and Tattooed Man, but it also featured cameos from Lex Luthor and the Riddler as fellow inmates. The interesting twist was that Oliver Queen would spend almost the entire movie without his costume or his bow, and rely purely on his wits to survive a prison riot. It was Die Hard meets The Shawshank Redemption with superheroes. Despite the strong script and unique premise, the studio prioritized other projects. And this gritty prison break film gathered dust on a shelf. Imagine the creator of Pan's Labyrinth directing a superhero team movie. Guillermo del Toro spent years developing Justice League Dark, a film that would have focused on the supernatural corner of the DC universe. The lineup included the Hellblazer John Constantine, the Elemental Swamp Thing, the Ghost Deadman, and the Magician Zatanna. Del Toro finished the script and turned it in, describing it as a story about monsters who were forced to be heroes. It was not about saving the world from aliens, but rather about magic, demons, and the occult. Warner Brothers could not figure out how to fit it into their shared universe. They hesitated. Del Toro moved on to win Oscars for The Shape of Water, and the project passed to other directors before dying quietly. We missed the chance to see Swamp Thing brought to life by a master of practical creature effects. Michael Keaton signing on for The Flash was not supposed to be a one-time event, but rather the setup for a live-action Batman Beyond movie. The script by Christina Hodson featured an older, retired Bruce Wayne training a new, younger Batman named Terry McGinnis in a futuristic Neo-Gotham. It was the legacy sequel fans had demanded for decades. Reliable reports suggested that Michelle Pfeiffer would return as Catwoman to rekindle the romance from 1992. The movie was in active development until the new leadership took over DC in 2023 and viewed it as clutter that would confuse audiences about who the real Batman was. The project was killed instantly, robbing us of the chance to see Keaton pass the torch to the next generation. After Aquaman made $1 billion, director James Wan announced a spin-off called The Trench.
Everyone assumed it was just a disposable monster movie about the scary fish creatures from the first film.
It sounded unnecessary, so few people cared when it was canceled.
Later, Wan revealed that The Trench was actually a secret Black Manta movie. The plot would have followed the villain, played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, exploring the deep ocean and battling these monsters using his tech. It was intended to be a smaller, intense horror action film that fleshed out one of DC's best villains without needing Aquaman to show up. The studio canceled it because they wanted to focus on the main Justice League characters, unaware that they were killing a potentially brilliant villain origin story. J.J. Abrams wrote a Superman script in the early 2000s that rewrote almost every rule in the book. Titled Superman Flyby, this movie imagined a Krypton that did not explode right away, but was instead a planet torn apart by a civil war between Jor-El and his corrupt brother. The wildest change involved Lex Luthor, who was a sleeper agent for the Kryptonians, surgically altered to look human rather than a human businessman. The script called for massive martial arts battles in the sky over Metropolis. Directors like Brett Ratner and McGee were attached, and they looked at actors like Josh Hartnett and Jude Law for the lead. It was an action-heavy reinvention, but the budget ballooned to over $200 million. The studio feared the massive changes to the lore and opted for the safer Superman Returns instead. This project was intended to be DC's answer to Star Wars. Ava DuVernay was hired to direct an adaptation of Jack Kirby's New Gods, with comic writer Tom King co-writing the script. The film would have centered on the romance between Mr. Miracle, the ultimate escape artist, and Big Barda, the warrior leading the female Furies. The villains were the heavy hitters of the DC universe, specifically Darkseid and Granny Goodness. Tom King included a scene where Darkseid, the terrifying god of evil, casually eats from a vegetable tray while threatening the heroes, to highlight the weird domestic tension of the characters. However, because Darkseid appeared in Zack Snyder's Justice League, the studio worried about having conflicting versions of the same villain. They shelved the project to avoid confusion and canceled what could have been a visually stunning space opera. Anyone who has seen The Raid knows Gareth Evans directs action uniquely. In 2017, he pitched a solo Deathstroke movie that would have been a lean, brutal origin story. Evans wanted to keep it short, at under 2 hours, and influenced by Korean noir films, there was no world-saving or sky beams, just a gritty revenge tale showing how Slade Wilson lost his eye and became the world's deadliest assassin. Joe Manganiello was attached to star after filming a cameo for Justice League. Evans described it as Shakespearean, but with intense violence. It was exactly the kind of mid-budget, R-rated action movie fans request. However, as the DCEU crumbled and executives shifted focus back to family-friendly blockbusters, this violent project was quietly removed from the slate. Before Christopher Nolan gave us Batman Begins, Darren Aronofsky wanted to make a Batman movie that makes Nolan's version look tame. His adaptation of Batman Year One was aggressive. In this script, Bruce Wayne was a homeless drifter living on the streets of Gotham, rather than a billionaire playboy. He was traumatized by his parents' death. And Alfred was a mechanic at an auto repair shop called Little Al's, who took Bruce in. The Batmobile was just a modified Lincoln Continental with a school bus engine. It was gritty, dirty, and rated R. Frank Miller, who wrote the comic, co-wrote the script with Aronofsky. Warner Brothers rejected the idea because they thought a homeless Batman who lost his fortune was too extreme. So they cleared the way for the more traditional origin story we eventually received. These movies serve as a reminder that the film industry is fragile. For every blockbuster that breaks records, a dozen fascinating failures never leave the boardroom. Some of these cancellations were likely for the best, as they saved us from giant spiders and confusing plots. But others like Batgirl or Justice League Dark feel like genuine losses to cinema. We will never know if they would have been masterpieces or disasters, and that mystery is almost better than the movies themselves. If you enjoyed this look into the unknown, hit like and subscribe for more.